Trust the only payment solution developed for attorneys and recommended by 47 state bars. LawPay.
Law school is hard, but it's easy compared to practicing law. People often don't realize that until they're living it, says Michael Anspach, an Ohio lawyer who's in his first year of practicing law and his 8th year of sobriety. I'm Stephanie Francis Ward, and on today's episode of the ABA Journal's Asked and Answered, we'll be talking about how he's managed stress his first year out and new practices he's found to replace some of the old ones that weren't working. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Yes. So you are a litigation associate, right?
That's right. Yes, I practice civil litigation on the defense side.
Tell me about your first year.
Well, I practice with my father. I grew up watching my dad practice. He's got about 45 years of experience, and I have the privilege to practice with him in the later years of his career. What he has done his entire life is civil litigation on the defense side for railroad for a while, and then we have done exclusively, on our end anyway, nursing home defense for about the last 10 years. So that's what my whole first year has been, defense of long-term care facilities. And I also had the opportunity 2 summers while I was in law school to get my first taste of it. And along the way, I just found myself loving the experience, loving the hands-on opportunities I was given, that I was seeing not as many of my peers having the same opportunity. So I wanted to take the chance to get more of a hands-on by practicing with my dad back here in my home city of Toledo, Ohio.
Okay. But at the same time, when we've had earlier conversations, the first year has been hard in terms of always needing to be available and thinking about just the consequences of a mistake. Whereas before you're an attorney, it's just about you for the most part, right? But now you have clients. Can you talk to me a little bit about both of those things?
Sure. Well, in law school, you feel pressure to succeed, but it's really a selfish endeavor because the success is purely based on ranking and scores and grades and that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, if you don't reach your ultimate goal, nobody really gets hurt. There's nothing riding on your shoulders, or no person, or any entity, in our case, most of the time. What I found was when I got to the practice of law, every action or inaction suddenly takes on a much greater consequence. Because I'll just talk, for instance, my first deposition I took a couple months ago, whereas objectively maybe an onlooker would think, well, you did well, that was great for your first time. I'm leaving thinking, oh gosh, I really hope I didn't cost the client this and this amount of money. I hope I didn't lose the case. Did I say something wrong? All these things that all of a sudden you're realizing this practice is really the defense of others, and you have to learn to be unselfish in it, and that it's a lot more daunting. So I started to experience that.
And some of that, do you think, is just the anxiety that maybe some people have? It's like, if you tend to have anxiety, it's like, oh, did I do something wrong? That's like a fear right away, right?
Yes. And I do, I am, I guess, prone to it in a way. I guess to describe myself, much of my success, if you will, in law school is this drive for a perfection that's really unattainable. And as a result of this drive for and the striving for perfection, you feel worry and anxiety and stress in not ever being able to reach it. And I do notice that many people who are lawyers, who are type A like myself, do experience similar things. I've had talks with some of my associates, actually, who may even have it worse than I do in some instances, but we all seem to have that similar kind of feeling. And for me, my ability to deal with anxiety, stress, and those sorts of things used to be coped with by using drugs and alcohol and other substances, which led me to having to find other means of dealing with it.
And you mentioned that you work with your father, and he's done this for so long. Sometimes parents can be very stressful, even when they don't realize it. I wanted for you to talk a bit. What's it like working with your father? And if you don't mind, just kind of telling his story as well, because I think the two of you have a very interesting story.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he would appreciate us talking about him, I'm sure. He he is well known as a trial attorney. It is daunting because when I started this work, well, I guess before I even decided to come to the firm, I spoke with many attorneys in the area and asked, well, I could go work for Dad, or I could go and shoot for the moon at some, 500 attorney firm and work 80 hours a week and do that sort of thing. And what I got consensus across the board about was, if you get any opportunity to work with your dad, you have to do it. And so already there's a shadow, because there is, this 45 years of experience and doing very well at what he does. I'll go back to that same first deposition I took. He asked me right before the deposition, do you think it's easier or harder for you knowing you're going to take this deposition with me sitting next to you?
Oh, so you went to the dep with him, and he let you drive.
Yes. No, I was taking the deposition. It was the first time I was actually taking it. I'd sat in on multiple depositions with him before I got to the point of being able to actually be the questioner. But of course, he's there making sure if I miss anything, and we'd take breaks and he'd have notes and say, make sure you hit this, make sure you get that. But of course, that does add a level of stress. And I will say, generally in my family, there have been eras, if you will, of preceding generations of successful people. And so there's always been this sort of shadow. But as it pertains to just this practice, my dad casts his own large shadow. And to speak a little bit more about his story, and I know he would not have a problem with me sharing this, as he's been open about it in the past, and including in the ABA Journal article that you wrote, he as well has struggled with alcohol issues. And he's got, I want to say, 14 years sober now. But I remember being young, being in the household with him, and then seeing the difference in his demeanor, both as a lawyer and as a father, when he was sober and when he was not. And I can tell you, as most probably would with alcoholics, we are better human beings when we are not drinking, because it affects not just the personal life, but of course the work life and everything into that.
I think one of the things for adults who can cause you stress with parents is it's hard to tell them if they're being annoying or telling them to stop. It's hard to put in boundaries. With your work relationship with your dad, can you tell him, I guess, or vice versa, is, stop doing this, you're bothering me, or, I need to put up a boundary? How has that worked out?
It's been interesting in, gosh, how should I say? I don't think we're very open individuals, both of us. And we can both be honest about those sorts of things. I think the hardest thing for me, honestly, in this is I would love just strict objectivity as it pertains to my practice. But I always have this lingering feeling in my head that he's my dad, so he's going to think I'm better than I actually am. So any praise I get is really coming from Dad, not from partner who's overseeing my work. Otherwise, our ability to communicate is generally pretty good, and I actually probably overstep boundaries a few times as it pertains to knowing my role. This morning, he actually he made the joke that now the tail is wagging the dog. So things like that do definitely come up.
Do you call him Dad in the office or by his first name?
I do call him Dad. And the interesting thing is, when I was clerking my first summer, I wasn't sure what to do, and a few of the other people in the office said, he's your dad, you should be calling him Dad. It sounds weird when you call him anything else. So Dad actually signs off his emails Bob/Dad when it's directed to me and other people.
I see. Well, it's not like people wouldn't know.
That's right.
So when we had talked before, you said that there were some problems you had in the winter in terms of stress of the practice and, finding ways to be comfortable in your lives. Can you talk about that a bit and how you handled it?
Yes. I want to say that I think first I deal in extremes. Many alcoholics do deal in extremes. And I was dealing with the extreme of trying to be the best in many different areas, and that included hitting the most hours of anyone. So I was creating a lot of stress in my life. I wanted to be here 7 days a week in the office. I wanted to show everyone. I think a part of being dad's son is that I'm not just dad's son. I have worth beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that added stress that kind of culminated in what happens is, for me, I will create all this disturbance and distraction in my life, and sometimes that includes with work. If I'm just doing, I'm never looking at me. And then what happened was, around December, judges are going on vacation, attorneys are going on vacation, no one wants to work around the Christmas holiday, and work slows down, like noticeably slows down. And for the first time, that speed started to slow down a little bit, and as that happened, I was noticing this emptiness inside. Because this is a wonderful profession, but one of the professors who helped me start the org for student well-being at Marquette, he would constantly refer to Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita and talk about one should work for the sake of the work itself, not for some outcome and not for some ends. And even in a Kantian way, one should act for the means rather than the ends. I was acting entirely for the ends. And in that, you're losing the moment, you're losing yourself. And I think in that, I discovered a depression I hadn't felt in a while.
And so how long did it take you to acknowledge it, and what did you do?
The hard thing for me sometimes is reflecting on and saying that something's not working that's been working for a while. For instance, yoga and meditation has been a constant part of my life for a few years, and that was consistent throughout it. I think the most important thing for someone in a situation where you're realizing this new experience isn't serving me is, I think, for me, flexibility, saying I need to incorporate new things. The first and foremost was something that I left behind coming from Milwaukee. I had a therapist I was seeing, someone I saw on a weekly, sometimes every 2 weeks, and it was getting back into that.
So you would just do like phone sessions or Skype?
This is not with him. I found a new one in Toledo.
Oh, you found a new one. I see.
Yes, yeah, with someone who I think many alcoholics, and I'll speak for myself, we have relational issues, and so I'm always looking for someone who can help me deal with how do I deal with all relationships in my life, be they romantic, be they work, be they friend, and actually I want to find someone who's practical. For instance, I was having an issue with one of my paralegals, and I went to him and I said, I don't know how to talk to her. There's this block between us. And as a result of it, now, the work is suffering because I'm doing work that I think she should be doing, and on and on. And we sat there for a half hour during that session, and he talked about, this is the way you approach her. This is the first thing you should say, acknowledge her side of things, and then you'll be able to speak your mind. And I did that the next day, and we have a great working relationship now. But things like that, like practical tools.
I see. And it sounds like he probably helped you see yourself maybe in a way others see you, or see things about yourself that you didn't realize you had.
That's right. Yeah, and even guiding me through what otherwise are fearful and difficult experiences. And yes, helping me to find in myself my own mettle, if you will, in terms of dealing with certain people, things, and what have you.
And you had also said that as a condition for being admitted to practice, you need to go to a certain amount of 12-step meetings weekly, correct?
That's right. I was already going to meetings. When I was in Milwaukee and I contracted with the Ohio Lawyers Assistance Program to go to 2 meetings a week, I was already involved with the program. But I will tell you that there are certain times where you think, I can go a week without a meeting. I can go a week and just do my one meeting. And what being contracted did was it held me accountable. Sometimes I have trouble holding myself accountable, which is why I give people what I would call spiritual consent to take my inventory. And usually that's a sponsor. But I gave that consent in this case, to the Ohio Lawyers Assistance Program to help hold me accountable. It's not as much that they're holding me accountable. I look at it, yes, they are, but more as they help me to hold myself accountable.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that was very helpful. I had a friend in Milwaukee as well who he was contracted with the Wisconsin Lawyers Assistance Program, and as a result of that, he had less time sober than I did, and so he had a more rigorous monitoring program. But he as well graduated sober, and to this day, more than a year out, he continues to be sober.
We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Michael is going to tell us about how learning to ride a motorcycle, which is something he's always wanted to do, has helped him manage the stress of practicing law. We'll be right back.
Did you know that attorneys who accept online payments get paid 39% faster on average than those using traditional payment methods? With LawPay, the only payment solution offered through the ABA Advantage program, you can accept client payments online, via email, or in person, no equipment needed. Visit lawpay.com/podcast to sign up and get your first 3 months free.
And we're back. I'm Stephanie Francis Ward, and on today's episode of the ABA Journal's Asked and Answered, I'm speaking with Michael Anspach. He's an Ohio lawyer who's in his first year of practice, and he has 8 years of sobriety. So, Michael, tell me about your motorcycle riding this year and how learning that skill has helped you with your stress levels of practicing law.
Sure. It was in my early sobriety, I read the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. It was a book written in the early 70s, and the way he described the motorcycle experience as being connected with everything around you, you were kind of moved into the present, and you can be one with your thoughts or not. And I had since then, since 2011 at least, been interested in pursuing it, at least getting on one, seeing what it felt like. And around the same time, I was trying to pull myself through this depression, if you will, for lack of a better way of stating it. I said, I'm going to do this now. I need something more than the seated meditation, because I would get home at the end of the day and try to sit, and the anxiety and the energy and the adrenaline from work just caused me more anxiety trying to sit with my eyes closed, even as someone who's been doing this a long time. So I had never ridden a motorcycle, but I decided this was something I would do, including taking the safety course, in my case through Harley-Davidson, 4-day course. And you get on, and it is very scary. It's harder than you think in terms of, this machine, and it's, of course, there's a lot of fear involved with it. But part of it was wanting to make something my own. So much of my life has been, like I said, working with, my lawyer life, working with Dad, and I wanted something that was sort of mine. And as I did it, I realized that what Robert Pirsig was writing about in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was close to the experience, but it's so much more, because I was actually, for the first time since starting this practice, being able to not shut off the mind, because you're not shut off. You're actually very connected with everything. You're actually hyper aware. You're using all 4 of your extremities. You're balancing the left and right hemisphere of your brain, and you do feel this. You almost feel like your autonomic nervous system is sort of relaxing, even in this sort of anxiety of getting on it. But once you're on it and you're moving, it was quieting the mind. And when you're on it, and all those things that you think about during the day are having due the next day. Got to get this motion written, have to respond to discovery, have to prepare for this deposition. All those things that are going on in your mind when you put on the helmet and you get on the motorcycle, it's almost like you breathe for the first time and you say, how much of that really matters in the grand scheme of things? And it wasn't until I did that actually, and that would have been March and April of this year, that I can truly say, I can look back on it and say, that's when all the heaviness of the profession sort of started to melt away. There's a book called The Unbearable Lightness of Being. I really like it. I love the way it describes how there's heaviness and lightness. And my experience in this profession has been the heaviness you experience can lead to the depression that I was feeling. And it's almost like that motorcycle helped pull me out into the lightness of life again and say, yes, you are responsible for someone's well-being to some extent. Yes, you are responsible for acting on someone's behalf and defending them to the extent you are able. And there's, of course, heaviness in that. But at the end of the day, the motorcycle makes you question, like, what's really important? You know, and you kind of say, it's a job. I will do my best at the job. And when I'm on this, and when I'm experiencing this moment, it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. And that's what that's done.
What kind of motorcycle did you get?
I bought a 2014 1200 Custom Harley Davidson, which is funny because actually when I was in Milwaukee, all 3 years, I was certain I would not leave Milwaukee without finally getting the motorcycle. And then, of course, I leave,
why don't you
and I
explain
finally
that
went
to
Toledo.
people if they don't know? Because Harley Davidson is based in Milwaukee, right?
Harley Davidson is based in Milwaukee. You know, even Governor Walker was known to get on a motorcycle from time to time. It's part of the culture there. It's part of the life there. And everywhere you go, you know, even at the airport, they have a Harley Davidson shop with a Harley sitting outside of it. And it's everywhere. And part of it was, though, part of the reason I never pursued the motorcycle beyond just thinking about it was, well, now I have to go get licensed again. I have to do another driving test. I have to get on a machine that I've never worked, and I don't even know which side is the clutch on. Where's the throttle? And it's a learning thing. And at that time, being in law school, I was like, I don't have time to pursue that. So I can't say it surprises me I left without getting one. But then coming back to Toledo, there was not going to be another one. I'll say that way. And her name is Sabrina. And you do have it's almost like riding a horse. My mom rode horses. My mom grew up riding horses. And I've been on horses.
So you don't want to bounce.
Right.
You want to
yes,
stay
you do not
with
want to
it
bounce.
and follow it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the horse feels you. The horse can almost tell what you're thinking. The horse can feel your stress. And I have been when I've been riding, I know that bike can feel me. And that's part of like Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is kind of like this connection between the machine and living life. And there is this sort of, it's interesting because it shows you a lot about yourself. If I'm stressed, if I'm anxious, if I don't let that go, I can feel the way the bike rides. I can feel the way I'm not riding as smoothly or as loosely as I need to allow it to do its thing. Slightest movements, tight tension in the mind causes tension in the body, causes tension in the motorcycle riding. So it actually is, it's something that's helped me to reflect on my stress level as I've been riding.
I think that sometimes people in recovery will call themselves adrenaline junkies and are looking for activities that can get their adrenaline up but are not addictive and are fairly healthy. Has that kind of been a good thing with you with the motorcycle as well? Do you like adrenaline?
That's a good question. I've never really. We just went to Cedar Point, which is it's a roller coaster park just an hour away from where I live in Sandusky. It's America's roller coaster, and I look at reflecting on it, it's like, oh, there is a part of me that like enjoys that adrenaline rush. I went with a friend who didn't necessarily, but he was nice enough to get on four of them with us. But to me, I feel like, oh, everyone must be into that. Almost like the way when I got sober, I imagined everyone drank to get drunk. That's the way I was like, why else would anyone drink? So same thing here. It's like, well, why wouldn't everyone be into these adrenaline fixes? It just seems like it does feed something. But to be honest, the adrenaline part of the motorcycle, as you become more comfortable with it, it does wear off. But what hasn't happened is the effect it has on the anxiety and stress and the ability to bring me into the present. I think the more you do anything like that, the adrenaline effect does become less.
Well, and also, didn't it give you the ability to not be tied to your phone? Because you can't be tied to your phone while you're writing.
That's a great point. And that was actually one of the reasons why I thought, well, this is great, because when I was editor-in-chief of the Law Review, that's probably where, even before the practice of law, I look at that and I had the same kind of 7-day weeks, and it was authors and 2Ls and people on the board, constant emails coming in. And in the evenings when I get off of work, if I get that email at 6:30, I almost feel compelled to respond. I don't feel like I'm able to let it go. And actually, many of my peers in Milwaukee who are at those really big firms, they have policies that says if you get a message, you have 30 minutes to respond. Thank God I don't have anything like that. But I've had to leave the phone at home. And well, what I'll do is I will put it on silent in my pocket because I want to have it with me. But it doesn't come out while I'm writing. It doesn't come out while I'm writing. And that has truly been unplugging, if you will, has been huge. Because so much of it, I find myself, going to bed and I've got the screen in my face and running through emails and the whole deal. It seems to just become another appendage, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Michael, that's everything we have time for today. I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences with us today.
I'm happy to do it anytime.
Great. And listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please find and rate us in Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting app. We'll see you next time for another episode of the ABA Journal's Asked and Answered.